Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to talk about how the government are planning to drop our water standards even further at the same time as water companies are collapsing under the weight of their own failed privatised model. But there could be good news as well for those of us who would like to see water companies nationalised anyway. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So we have a serious problem with water pollution right now, despite the Cabinet Secretary in charge of this, Theresa Coffey, insisting that the water is cleaner than in 2010. Right? It's fairly obvious that that's nonsense. People know that this rampant level of pollution is something which happened a few years ago. This is not the frog in the boiling pot. It happened very suddenly, very recently. Now, I'm not sure how many people realise that it just so happened to occur after we left the single market, but whether they draw that link or not, they know it's relatively recent. Not that our water quality was brilliant before, but it was not noticeably bad to the point, or dangerous to the point where it's a regular talking point for people living near rivers and lakes. And we know the reason it's happening. There is an expense to treating sewage, and water companies exist purely to make profit. Since Brexit, the Tories have made it cheaper in many cases for water companies to dump raw sewage and pay a fine than it is for treating it. You know, the level of the fine has been set below the level of the cost of treating the sewage. So it's like, well, okay, well, we'll just dump the sewage then. So what happens? Water companies now routinely dump raw sewage, even on days where legally they can't, hence attracting the fines, instead of treating it because it's cheaper. The practice will end surprisingly quickly when Labour are in power, but for now this is our reality. And now the government is planning to reduce the quality of our water monitoring further as well. Now, we've already lowered our standards for water quality monitoring, and we're planning to do it again. And what that will mean is that water companies will have even more incentive to dump even more raw sewage, because it will be harder to catch them out when they dump it at a time when they don't have a good excuse. And every time it gets missed, it's a bit like, you know, people who speed in a car, isn't it? A lot of the time, if they don't get caught, well, then they're incentivized to carry on doing it. And if every now and then they get caught, not enough to have the license taken away, they'll just carry on doing it. Similar sort of thing here. It means they'll attract fewer fines because they'll get caught out fewer times, which means that they can then afford to dump even more sewage. Our rivers may actually be little more than sludge by the time the general election rolls around. And of course, it's not like Labour will be able to implement their policies the day after. That will take some time as well. We could be like 2 years away from getting a grip on the situation. And then goodness knows how long before our waters return to good health again. And the motivation for water companies to dump as much as they can will be extra especially high because Ofwat, the regulator, has warned about the financial health of 4 water companies in England. So it's not even just the case that water companies are looking at it and going, well, it's cheaper to dump and get the odd fine than it is to treat it. So we'll do that because we make more profit. There are water companies struggling to make a profit at all. There are 4 water companies in serious financial trouble. There have been 2 others that were in a bit of trouble as well. You know, and so... And when they say, you know, 4 water companies that are, you know, in financial health problems, what they mean is they're essentially going bust unless something happens. Sinking under the weight of the failed privatisation model, whereby they were allowed to load themselves up with debts, not for investment, because they'd have had a return from the investment, but just to pay higher and higher dividends to shareholders, for which there is no return. So then you struggle to service the debt in later years. It's an insane model, completely insane model, whether you're pro-privatisation or not, and of course is now collapsing. And according to the Financial Times, Ofwat have said that more debt and equity would be needed to sustain the companies, given, amongst other things, the potential for fines and the investment required. Well, this move by the government to reduce our water quality monitoring will help the water companies avoid those fines, so it will reduce that cost. But Labour plan on insisting on good water quality monitoring and automatic fines for any raw sewage dumping. At the moment, they're only fined under certain conditions. Labour's attitude will be, no, if you dump raw sewage, you're getting an automatic fine, right? So whereas the Tories are trying to let the water companies reduce their overheads at the cost of our environment, Labour are planning on making them doing their jobs by making it more expensive not to, which is a complete reversal. And if Ofwat are correct in the financial position of these water companies, and that the only remedy is to keep injecting them with more and more cash, then what we're looking at is a model which, I mean, it's not really working under the Tory system of making it easier and easier for the water companies to get away without doing their jobs, because they are already struggling financially. But you would think downright impossible under Labour. And I look at this a little bit, like rail and steel. So over the last decade or so, the government have often turned to injections of public money to keep them going, whereas taking them into public hands would have cost no more, and then it'd be in public hands. In fact, the Tories have actually had to take a couple of rail franchises into public hands when even that idea of just injecting public money into it became impossible. Well, if the water companies collapse under the weight of their own greed, in the same way that rail companies have, and a Labour government, of course, have no interest in pumping in a load of public money just to prop up shareholders. And it doesn't matter what you think of the Labour leadership, that's not viable. The economy is completely knackered. We need every penny for their investment plans. So it sounds to me like the conditions for water companies to be brought into public hands, only in a very modern way. Instead of just the usual way where people are stuck in the 1970s think, oh, just nationalise it. What do you mean by that? Oh, just pile on the national debt to pay off the shareholders. Oh, okay, and then lose the next election? Yeah, no, we're not doing that. So what we do instead is we wait for them to collapse, because they're collapsing right now. And instead of going, oh, we'll help you, say, oh, you're collapsing, that's interesting, we'll just wait for you to collapse and then just take you over. I want to make sure they take their debts away with them as well. We could do without that. But in the meantime, it looks like we're going to suffer even worse pollution. Even more public money being used to pay for the privilege of having shit in our rivers. We may have to see this get a lot worse before it gets better. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.